Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the Scrutiny Committee. So I'll just read the usual preamble. So all visitors must sign into the visitor book at Kilncraig's reception. This includes council staff from other buildings. There is no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm test today. If the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. The council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of the Parliament Walk. Kilncraig staff should report to their floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshal is advised it's safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle until cleared to do so by the fire marshal to ensure access routes are kept clear for emergency vehicles. Please note this is a public meeting and the members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing. The taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during meetings unless with the express permission of the chair. The members attending virtually activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join by video, and can all attendees mute their microphones when not speaking. Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members attending virtually wish to speak at any point, please indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button. Members in the chamber should also raise their hands. I will bring in at an appropriate time. If members have not been able to access all the papers for the meeting, please indicate. Today we will hear each of the items set out in the agenda. I will invite the officer to present the paper and members will have the opportunity to ask questions before we proceed to debate and decision. I'll now ask the clerk to let us know of any apologies, and can anyone indicate if they wish to declare an interest?
Thanks, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Benny, Councillor Keogh and Councillor Fairley. Everyone else is in attendance apart from Councillor Quinn, who may still attend.
Okay, thanks very much. And we'd like to welcome to our first meeting this morning Joanna MacDonald, the new IGB Chief Officer. Welcome, Joanna. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to the agenda. So first of all, we'll go to the minutes of the last meeting. Can we look at the minutes for accuracy? So page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, and page 12. Are we all okay? Yep. We'll move on to the first item, item 4, and that it's the corporate risk register, and that will be introduced by Sherry Jarvie.
Morning, councillors. So this report provides the committee with the 24-25 quarterly update on the council's corporate risk register. The council's corporate risk approach is set out in the corporate risk strategy, seeks to enable the council to take a strategic view on the internal and external challenges and factors which have the potential to impact the delivery of our priorities, and to take action to plan for and mitigate risks where we can. The council follows a systematic and embedded process on risk management, which involves the regular review of risks with strategic directors and senior managers, consideration of new and emerging external factors, and consideration of risks through the Corporate Risk and Integrity Forum. The Corporate Risk Register and service risks are also reported to committee on a regular basis, to Audit and Scrutiny Committee, and effectiveness of the Council's risk management approaches is also assessed through internal and external governance and audit mechanisms. The corporate risk profile presented at Appendix A contains 18 risks. No new risks have been added or removed to the register since the previous report to committee in October 2024. 2 risks have increased in score since the previous report, namely inadequate workforce planning, continued contribution to climate change. An explanation for these changes are set out at Appendix A. The 3 risks escalated in the previous update to committee have been subject to particular managerial focus, namely the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, or UNCRC, the condition of the school estate, and reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, or RAC. Committee is also asked to note the ongoing continuous improvement work to enhance the Council's risk maturity through implementation of the risk management strategy delivery plan presented to Council in August 2024. This work has included training and improved integration with other governance approaches, including internal audit, the annual governance statement approach and base value. I'm happy to take any questions on the report, and I'm also joined by colleagues who can help answer any specific questions on risks you may have.
You've now to questions. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, this isn't a question, I suppose, about any specific risks, but I suppose this is a report overall. I was looking at it when I was looking at the Council's priorities, as we do, and there's many risks on here that I don't see tie up directly with Council priorities. So I was just wondering, you know, how often we do review these, cross-match them with the Council priorities to make sure that what's coming out here as a risk is really reflecting the priorities and where we are in delivering those. I am thinking about transformation, I'm thinking about the child poverty, I'm thinking about the delivery of the wellbeing hub, all these things that have been, you know, specifically highlighted as priorities for the Council, but I'm not really seeing direct correlations here in the risk register.
So we've had a lot of feedback on the risk approach and how we present the risk report over the past year specifically. We did bring a risk strategy and delivery plan to Council last year, and a lot of that seeked to tie up the relationship between risk management, performance management and other internal controls, and I think a lot of that information was presented in that report. It was quite a hefty report. I think going forward we could maybe in the next paper that we bring forward seek to tie some of that back up. I know Judy, who is on Teams today, is doing a lot of work to try and really integrate that relationship between performance, risk management, our strategic priorities, you know, service priorities, be the future. It would maybe be a sizable report to bring that back to committee every time, but we could certainly seek to do that for the next quarterly update. That would be the year-end update.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I suppose some of the reflections have been as a result of the training with Judy that members recently undertook, and I've been thinking about the risks and the different services and how it could be presented a bit better, and perhaps almost as part of the business reports that are coming back and the planning going forward, because I do think there are a lot of risks out there that are not being reflected, and when I read kind of some of these, they're just so high level that you think, well, how does that really kind of tie in with us? So it would be good to have a chat around that and maybe
Okay, thank you. Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Shireen. My question is really about the rate of change. I had a look at the same report from a year ago, or a year before that, and since then there have been only 4 changes in scale, apart from 3 that got moved off. 4 changes, 3 for the good, 2 for the better, and 1 worse. The worst one, funnily enough, the one that got worse was inadequate workforce planning, which struck me as a bit strange, thinking of the effort's been going into that. But if we look at the 4 top treat ones, the 4 highest scoring treat ones, from a year ago, no movement at all, except an improvement in the insufficient financial resilience one. It moved by 5 points, a score of 5. And obviously a lot of work's gone into that as well. So we can see some change, but generally speaking, the chart has remained static for a year. That doesn't seem to indicate sort of an effective addressing of the problem. That may be unfair, but so I would ask for your comments on the unfairness or otherwise of that statement.
I think it's a fair comment to make, Councillor. I think those risks in particular, and a lot of the red risks, where you would see the changes are around some of the mitigating actions that Council is taking. And I know Judy does a lot of work when we review each of these risks every quarter with directors and senior managers to make sure that we're capturing the most up-to-date narrative, so the management commentary, the actions we're taking, the latest information we have on those risks. But ultimately, some of those, many of those, are not within our direct control to be able to influence. However, we need to be able to adapt, plan for, and make sure we're considering those risks when we're, conducting our planning and delivery of services and projects. So where you would see changes in the mitigating actions and the management commentary for some of those, but if we take impact of poverty, inequality and changing demographics, we're doing a lot of work in that area. However, nationally, regionally, locally, the information that we have on poverty is still telling us that's a significant risk. So we're doing a lot of work and we can evidence that in the management commentary, but those risks are going to take a long time to address in terms of the score. We would still want to retain that one as a red label because we know it's a significant issue in Manager.
Okay, that's fine. If I take what you say at face value, we maybe need another category then, which is somewhere between treat and tolerate, because what you've just described is more of a tolerate than a treat. And I think to give us an expectation, we should maybe have a blended category, which is elements of it are treatable, but there are external factors that make it difficult, because it just means that, if you put it in as a treat, that's an invitation to someone reading it to expect that the treatment will actually have an effect, but it doesn't appear to be having an effect.
I think the treat in terms of the management actions that we are undertaking are making a difference. However, there is still a substantial residual risk. When we looked at the new risk management strategy, Judy expanded the list of criteria that we would use to assess risks, and I might ask her to come in a second and say a wee bit more about that. So in terms of our mature approach to risk management, we think that has developed over time, but we're still going to have some residual risk, even though we're taking management actions that will treat the symptoms or the impact of risk. We're not going to remove the risks completely, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I wouldn't for a minute expect it would just disappear off the sheet completely, but if the management actions are having some effect, that effect should be to reduce the risk, you would expect, would you not?
Yes, some take longer than others, but we have seen other risks reduce in score over the past 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And I think in the Q1 or Q2 report, we'd actually de-escalated risks from the corporate risk register onto service risk registers. And you'll see some of those in reports later today. So it does happen, just a bit harder with some of the higher red risks.
Okay, thanks.
So I've just got a few questions on, so financial resilience, the position noted as 13 million, but I presume even after the announcement yesterday by the Scottish Government, that figure will have changed. And I'm just wondering if there is a movement in that 13 million figure, just with different things that have come out of the Scottish Government and other levels.
I'm going to ask Lindsay maybe to help answer that question if you could.
Thank you. So the 13 million was the working assumption that we've had throughout the year before the draft settlement came forward. And we've been updating members in terms of the briefing. So in taking account what we've heard through the settlement and the additional funding that was provided through the settlement, that gap has come down, and that will be that's been presented in a briefing to members. So we had additional 4.5 million from the government, so that's come down, but we'd also had to incorporate additional changes. So there is a revised gap that we'll be reporting to members through the normal channels in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thanks very much. Just on the financial resilience as well, I know that later on we're looking at mitigating factors on the external audit recommendations where we were saying that we were going to have a financial strategy. Should that not be included in that as a mitigating factor in terms of production of our financials? And back to what Councillor Forson said, there's been a lot of movements in different areas like that, and although this is high level, I'd say that's a fairly significant, so I wonder if that should be included in there.
Yes, I think in terms of timing, that would be incorporated in the next report. I think because of the timing of this, when we'd talked about the medium-term financial strategy and made the commitment to do that, we've still got that in our work schedule to do. So the next report will reflect that that is the aim, and if we've not presented by then, or if we have, then it will include more detail on that.
Thanks very much. And just on the impact of poverty, I noticed that the City region deal was mentioned as a mitigating factor, and I just wondered what the plans were within the City region deal to work on poverty and areas of poverty.
I'm hoping someone might be able to come and help answer that question.
Change the rules, Ellen, so you can come in.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the City region deal, as we know, we have significant investment tied up with the City region deal, whether that be through the programmes coming to Clackmannanshire around about our innovation campus, and about our work in terms of cultural heritage and tourism, all of which we believe will bring jobs and opportunities to Clackmannanshire. Over and above that, we have the skills works linked to the City region deal, all of which we wish, we hope, and we are working towards skills pathways, opportunities for jobs and careers from the City region deal. And this investment we hope to capitalise on in terms of that growth locally, in terms of local businesses, but also about employment opportunities. So that's where we see the knock-on benefit to this particular risk from the City region deal.
Thanks very much, Kevin. I know it's taken a significant amount of time to get to where we're at with the City region deal, so do you see this some action in the near future with it? We
are certainly progressing this work as quickly as possible. It is a partnership approach in terms of particularly around about the Alloa Innovation Campus with the University of Stirling, and we have started some preliminary work around about that around about Bloomfield House and linked to that cultural heritage and tourism work. So we are starting to see work ongoing. There is connections and work being taken forward around about that skills pathway and supporting the other City region deal opportunities that are taking place. So I am confident that we will see progression coming. The pace in that, etc., isn't always necessarily at our control.
Very well answered, Kevin. Just looking at further down, you know, in terms of the kind of workforce training side of things and the workforce development and planning, I know there's been a concern before getting people to do their mandatory training. Do you see any improvements in that area?
Can maybe comment on that. So I'll absolutely come up. So we are continuing to ask our directorates to ensure that mandatory training is undertaken. There are areas where uptake needs to be improved. We are working particularly around staff who don't have access to IT equipment, etc. There are alternative ways and processes that we're doing to roll that out. P&P, 100% mandatory training uptake. I'm not sure how that's reflected in other areas, but Alistair, you may have a...
I think Chris has just stole the good news there, but I was about to say, yeah, I mean, the approach to mandatory training that we have is fairly well embedded now. There are still challenges with uptake. What we find is that the challenges focus around staff which are non-PC facing, but we have a lot of support that's available via that toolbox talks or video briefings that are available, and actually just this week reminders went out to strategic directors and to key contacts to try and uptake those levels of mandatory training ahead of the new regime of mandatory training that will be coming in April. But it is positive to see, such as with PMP and with other areas, that there is progress with that compared to previous years.
Excellent, that's good news, thank you. On the school estate condition, disrupting education provision, I'm aware that the school estate came to a previous council meeting and that we approved spending. So I'm wondering if that's out of date or whether there's a change on that area of risk.
It might be a matter of timing, but Kevin looks like he wants to.
Thank you, Chair. So we did bring a paper to Council in terms of school conditioning. There was an agreed priority list, particularly 5 primary schools, in terms of that should be focused with money set aside within the programme to take work forward. Officers have been progressing those work packages to take forward that work. The work will be coming forward this year, and certainly we'll see that difference take place. But it is a timing issue in terms of those contracts in place, in terms of the report that is in front of you. So the report that you have is accurate, but there is plans and work in place to mitigate that work in that sense. So you should see that develop and improve in time. It will also be wrapped into the creation of an asset management strategy and the learning estate strategy, and is being progressed by officers at present.
Good to know that, thank you. And just my final one is probably for you as well, Kevin, in terms of sorry, I'm asking so many questions, but RAC, so RAC is obviously mentioned, and I know that with what's happened with RAC, it's still a significant concern. So are we doing a lot of investigations into our other property portfolio just to make sure that that's been addressed?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of RAC, it does continue to be a risk for us. We know that there are a number of residential properties that have RAC present. We have one corporate building that has RAC in it, and that's been monitored regularly. And we are comfortable where it is at present. There are options in place in terms of those residential homes that have RAC in it, and we're currently engaging with tenants and owners of those properties, particularly the 3 blocks that were decanted just over a year ago. In fact, actually, I have a meeting next week with that owners group in terms of options for going forward. And there will be a paper come back to Council specifically on that work. It does remain a risk for us. We are very aware of it. We are monitoring it regularly to ensure that we are comfortable with the state of those properties with RAC within.
Do you know how soon that will come to Council, Kevin? Will it be a sort of upcoming Council meeting?
So I'm hoping to bring a paper following my meeting with the owners in terms of that options appraisal, and certainly once we've had that conversation, it would be fairly swiftly. So certainly I'm aiming at this moment in time for the Council in March.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Okay.
Certainly. Kevin, given that you've just mentioned that there's RAC in other buildings, some commercial and some residential, have these resulted in evacuations? And if not, is that because they are not as serious to life as the 3 that were evacuated, or is it a new policy on evacuation?
The properties that have RAC in it have been assessed in terms of how stable the RAC is. The 3 blocks that were issued with notices was because the condition of the RAC in there was serious, and it was a concern, and therefore it required those notices to be issued on those 3 blocks. The other properties are, as I said, are deemed stable, but they continue to be monitored so that we are on top of it and we know where they are in terms of their condition.
Thank you. Any more questions? Nope. Well, thanks. I know we've given you loads of questions this morning, so thanks very much. I'm happy to move the paper. Certainly behind the scenes, we have a lot of training risk and scrutiny through Judith, which has been really helpful. So I think there's a kind of wider side with the risk profile, which has been very helpful to us as councillors. It's useful to see the document. I know members' concerns about the movement of and hopefully we'll be able to address that in the future. But thanks to officers and particularly Cherie for the paper, which is really helpful for us, as you can see from all the questions. So happy to formally move. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Fox. And are we happy to note the paper? Yeah.
Maybe come in.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, I did forgot we're open to debate thing.
It's not really debate because I'm not kind of questioning really anything that's in the report. Although I do think that the ongoing training is maybe raising issues in members' minds about the risk register and what should be included. So hopefully we can have discussions on that moving forward. I did want to take the opportunity in debate to address the city deal, since we can't answer the questions. I think I'm one of the few people left in the council that's been around and involved in the city deal since the beginning. It's been 5 years now since it was signed off, and I think unfortunately the perception is when things like this are signed off that we're going to see benefits immediately. It was always going to be a 10 to 15 year plan, and then probably not seeing the benefits for that after the kind of finalisation of all the investments. So when we're looking at the impacts on poverty that the city deal will have, we're probably not going to see these to maybe 15, 20 years down the line, because it's the ongoing work that will then deliver the results that will take time to come through. So I think it's easy to expect a really quick result in these sorts of things, but we just have to keep, I think, focused and steady that the longer term plan was to use the city deal investment to reduce poverty in the longer term. Straight from the inception, the city deal was focused on inclusive growth, but also with community wealth building. It was the first city deal in Scotland to have community wealth building really intertwined through it. So these measures should hopefully start to impact and see results in the local area. I have to say I am a bit sceptical because a lot of the results were predicated on private sector investment. There's not yet a plan on how that private sector investment is going to be leveraged and is going to start to deliver results. So at the moment it's very much investment from the government and the council and the university that's focused on Clackmannanshire. So we do need to keep an eye on that, because I'm not particularly convinced that the city deal will deliver everything that it's supposed to be delivering. So as a partner in that, and we are a partner, we are not delivering it alone, we're relying on other partners to work with us in that. I do think we need to keep a wee bit of an eye on that. And I suppose it's probably quite right that it's there in the risk register. So thanks.
It's quite well made, thank you. Anybody else like to debate the paper? No? Okay, so we're happy to note the paper. Apologies for that. So on to item 5. So we're going to look at the internal audit progress report, and that will be Isabel who will present that.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, everyone. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on progress with completing our 24-25 internal audit plan. The plan was agreed by committee in June 24, and it comprised of 15 assignment areas to be completed by the team during the year. Paragraph 3.1 highlights that 9 internal audit reports will be issued in 24-25. This does not include those reports that we issued to the Clackmannanshire and Stirling Integration Joint Board or to the Central Scotland Valuation Joint Board. Paragraph 3.1 also states that to date 4 assignments have been completed to final report stage, 1 review is currently in progress, and 4 have yet to be started. A summary of progress is set out at Appendix 1 with the scope and findings of the 2 finalised reports since the last committee at Appendix 2. I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 3.3, which refers to additional work that we're currently doing in adult social care. This work may have an impact on capacity to complete the remaining audits as part of the 24-25 internal audit plan. Outcomes will be reported on that to the next committee. Paragraphs 3.4 to 3.7 provide an update on the National Fraud Initiative for 24-25 and the work undertaken by the internal audit team and also the Falkirk Council Corporate Fraud Team to assist in maximising the results from the matches. To finish, I'd ask members to note the recommendations and conclusions. That is, that the team are making progress with the 24-25 internal audit work. However, this is subject to change and resource will be directed to where it adds most value. I do anticipate that there will be an impact on the completion of the 24-25 internal audit plan due to the additional work mentioned earlier. If you've got any questions, I'll try my best to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a quick question really. You mentioned the extra piece of work and the impact that that could potentially have on the rest of the audit plan. When that's added in, how do we come to the conclusion as to what then becomes a priority and then what falls off? Because I would imagine that everything that's on this plan is on there for a reason. So it would just be good to get an understanding of how we reach what then becomes a priority and whether there's kind of any, I suppose, risks at those changing priorities.
Yeah, you're completely right. We have to weigh up what's left. So the 4 that are left, you can see on the report, are community benefits, the follow-up of the purchase order arrangements, follow-up of grade 1 and capital arrangements. So what we'll do is we'll look at each of them in their own merits, see what ones, lots of things come into play in it because it depends who's available to do the work. It depends how long we think those audits are going to take. It depends what areas they involve and making a decision on that. What I would say though, to give a little bit of comfort to councillors, is that anything that we don't get finished by the time we agree in our 25-26 plan, they will be our first priority in the new plan. So anything that we don't get done or started certainly in the next couple of months, we will defer them into next year's plan. So everything, and unless there was a bigger issue, we would intend to try and make sure all of those audits are undertaken. But probably depending on the time that we've available with the work that we're doing just now, I would anticipate that we'll probably get 2 of those started. They may not be finished for the next committee, but I'm hoping that by the time we come back next time, that we've got probably another 2 of those on the go. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going to 3.5 on page 28, it talks about, roughly halfway through the paragraph, the national exercise can only be completed satisfactorily with buy-in from services. And then I got the feeling that there was perhaps a problem in getting that buy-in. Am I misreading that?
You're not misreading it. It is about the capacity to do the work, and the NFI work is you can see from there the amount of savings that they're looking for and the amount of money that's going towards fraud. So there's never enough resource getting put towards it, if you like. The issue that I have as an internal audit manager is that we aren't responsible for all of these matches to be undertaken. The services are. So we act as a sort of coordinator to make sure that all of the actions are being taken. Sometimes there are matches that go obviously with maybe other councils, so comments come in to say, right, well, for example, we have this member of staff working for us, but the match is suggesting that you have them working full time for you too. Can you look into it? So it's making sure that people are given a little nudge to try and add that into their day job to make sure that some of that work is being undertaken. There has been more of a push, I would say, at the centre of this to try and make sure that it is given its place and that a lot more of the matches work is undertaken, because what tends to happen is if they're not undertaken as part of the exercise, they then carried forward into the next exercise. So there is a want to try and get as much of them cleared as possible.
Thanks, yeah. I think I understood most of that's the sound quality, but am I reading into it then that it's not a lack of cooperation, it's a lack of capacity that is the challenge here? Absolutely. It isn't the lack of cooperation. The training sessions that we did have definitely helped to
get the mindset there to make sure that they're not falling off and that they are undertaken as quickly as possible. When the matches come in, they're risk rated, so the want is that the high risk areas are undertaken as quickly as possible, and then that the medium and lows follow on from that.
Fine, thanks very much. Just while you're there, on 4.1, last sentence about the internal audit manager, anticipate there will be an impact on completion, but I think you've covered that, I think, in an earlier answer. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Don't think there's anything else. Yeah, on page 31, section 5, I've written beside that, all directors' working recommendations outstanding. I've written anything notifiable to committee in that. The working recommendations is outstanding. Is there anything in that we should know about?
No. Sorry, Chris, I can see you want to come in.
There's a report coming up next regarding the outstanding actions from internal audits. I'm covering that next, so hopefully that'll answer some of your questions.
I'm sure it will. Thanks very much. Okay, that's fine.
Are you Councillor Coyne?
I think so, yeah. I'm having me hunt through it someday.
I'll just ask the question in the meantime. It's just really a bit of a follow-on from Councillor Forson's question that, and I note the point that you've made about parts that haven't yet started. I noticed there were a number of areas that were ongoing, and so it wasn't just the not started or in progress. The additional work that's coming forward, will that have an impact on the in progress work as well, or the ongoing work?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does, because at the moment that work that we're doing is it's taken up a lot of our time. The in progress work is the leisure banking work that we're currently doing, and that is still happening. We have meetings in place for that one, so we're trying to make sure that we're juggling everything when there's time to do so. But as I said earlier, there will definitely be some impacts, but we will endeavour to make sure that everything that's on there is undertaken, or there's a plan for it. Thank you.
I was just going to follow up on that. Is it sort of normal practice for something to come in from left field that's another priority that knocks off the plan? Because it would seem to me that a lot of these things that are being mentioned are extremely important, and is that something that regularly happens, or would it not normally be sort of planned in at a later date?
Yeah, you're totally right. We don't actually have it happen that often, but you will notice throughout our reports that come up every time, I'd always try to emphasise that the plan is flexible, because we just never know what is coming in and what will have to take priority. The work that is ongoing is of a high priority, and that's not to say that the work on this plan isn't, but it's not time sensitive. The work that we're doing in the other area is time sensitive. So again, I'll just reiterate that we will, the assurance is there that you will still get these reports in front of you. It might just take a bit longer.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? No. I'm happy to formally move the paper. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Forson, paper's open to debate. Would you like to debate the paper? No. We're happy to note it? Yep. Okay, thank you. On to item 6, internal audit actions progress report. And that is over to Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Committee. This report invites the Committee to note, comment on and challenge Officers' review on the progress of internal audit actions. It provides a summary of outstanding actions with Appendix 1, offering a more detailed update. As noted in a previous report to Committee in June 2024, a total of 199 actions were identified, of which 109 or 55% remained outstanding at that time. The latest update shows that, excluding newly added actions from recent internal audit work, there has been a significant improvement, with 141 of the original 199 actions, or 71%, now completed. The remaining actions are expected to be completed beyond their target dates. Efforts continue to ensure that all agreed internal audit recommendations are implemented in a timely manner. However, we acknowledge that increasing service demands and resource constraints due to budget pressures continue to impact officers' ability to meet agreed timelines. To maintain momentum, there is now a stronger focus across our directorates on ensuring progressing the completion of audit actions. This includes a regular standing agenda item at the Strategic Leadership Group, the Extended Strategic Leadership Group, and at Directorate Senior Management Team meetings. Further update reports will continue to be provided to the committee at future meetings, and Chair, officers from our directorates who are in attendance and I are happy to take any specific questions on the appendix or the report.
Any questions from anybody? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, good report there, and I'm glad to see the progress made. There are two on the progress summary that remain at no assurance, and I was just wondering if we could have an update on, I suppose, the progress there and when we're likely to see these move to at least some sort of limited assurance.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Forson. So in relation to officers continue to take action, so I think the two you're referring to are the adult social care purchase order arrangements and the overtime arrangements. So I'm not sure if officers from the HSEP want to come up and respond to the adult one. In terms of overtime arrangements, that's ongoing, and our directors are working through the recommendations and the actions. Internal audit will be coming back as part of the internal audit plan to look at the grade 1 recommendations, and they'll be looking for evidence at that point to make sure that these recommendations have been actioned and in place, so the report would come back at that point.
Good morning. Thank you for the questions. So firstly, if I can provide an update that just a lot of the recommendations actually relate to the Tech 1 system. And just yesterday, there was a training session really well facilitated by our club manager colleagues with HSEP managers that was really well received around the system. So I know that's been an outstanding action. In relation to a number of the audit recommendations, they're intrinsically linked around the care and the experience of people receiving care. So as a priority, and although I'm new in post, I have seen that evidenced over the months prior, it's been a real priority around the driver for this being about ensuring that the people in receipt of care are actually getting the right care at the right time. We're paying the right amounts for that as well. But I'll hand over to you and to really add on any more detail.
Thank you. I think just going back to the point around Tech 1 and the training, I think that was really useful yesterday. What that is flagging is other actions that we need to take around improving our control environment and ensuring managers have the right tools for the job in terms of the information they get. There's also an ongoing piece of work. We know there are several issues around legacy IT systems and including Fringe. So there's an ongoing piece of work around how to develop a single commissioning function, but also how we then look at the business processes at the back of that. We know some of these legacy systems are causing real recurring issues around failure of processes and really working at what we can do with the tools and resources we have available to improve that and make that more resilient going forward. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Page 42, we talk about building security. The 36 actions have now been complete, but 9 have remained to be completed. Can you give us some details on the ones that are to be completed, please?
Thank you, Councillor Earl. In relation to the overall security, so we now have established a short-life working group to take forward the outstanding risks. We're developing a security policy in relation, and we'll a number of colleagues across place and the performance directors are working on that. We have been waiting for actions that are arising out of Martin's Law, which elements have changed, which now no longer apply to us, but we're going to look at best practice and some of the things that will come out of that and include that. We will have a high-level security policy, and then we will cascade down to premises duty holders to ensure that there are locational security policies in place. We had a recent audit of Kilncraigs, which was supported by Police Scotland, so a number of recommendations have come out of that as well. So colleagues are working on that, and I would hope that will be resolved in the next few months in terms of the security policy and the outstanding actions.
To these six outcomes that are still to be dealt with, that's not good. Is that creating a security issue that we should be aware of?
So every property, every premises will have a premises duty holder who should be ensuring that there's sufficient security in place. We know that there are areas that internal audit obviously picked up on. We have improved, hopefully, on those areas of those six outstanding actions. I think there's a risk assessment due down in Kellybank, Kevin. I think that will probably take place in due course that we'll be working with. But I think overall, in terms of security, the biggest one I think for Kilncraigs is tailgating, for example, and is continually to cascade that to staff about the importance of checking ID, making sure that visitors are not unaccompanied in the building. So each premises duty holder has an obligation there to ensure that there's sufficient security. But the overall ask will come from that new security policy and the templates that we're designing around that.
On the tailgating issue there, I was actually approached by a member of staff who asked me, have you got your badge? Who are you? Well, the video's with you, but it was actually good to be stopped and asked.
Councillor Quinn?
Thanks, Chair. Chris, just taking a sort of helicopter view of this whole exercise, the summary at the end is 4 substantials, sorry, my summary, 9 limiteds and 2 no assurance at all. Just looking at that as a bold statement seems a bit depressing. Is it a cultural issue here? What's your view on why we're looking at 4 subs and 9 limited rather than the other way around?
So, Councillor, you recall from the assurance report that we got from internal audit, I think we came to committee in June, we moved from substantial assurance to limited assurance overall. We've undertaken a piece of work recently with the senior management team and the team leaders across the council that showed that how our assurance levels have fallen over the piece. So it's re-establishing governance, it's re-establishing control frameworks and ensuring that from day one, from the new induction process we're running out of that, is part and parcel of a manager's role and responsibility in terms of understanding our control environment, understanding the governance frameworks that we've got. It does go back to the point I raised in my opening remarks around capacity of officers as well, and the demands that we've got there as well. So all these things are kind of coming together and having an impact.
Okay, you're aware of that. You're beginning to cope with it. So are you confident that when we look at this in a year's time, they'll be around the other way?
My desire is that that would be the case, and I would hope that this year we'll get a substantial assurance of that. I'm not particularly confident that at this moment in time, given some of the reports that are coming through are still remaining as limited. But my aim and my goal is that will be turned around, and I'm working on it.
I'm going to write that down and hold you to it.
Yeah. So in terms of just following up on Councillor Coyne's question, a number of the actions were completed out this target. I think there was a fair number of them. So is that really in terms of just what you were saying, in staff capacity, that you were unable to complete these actions within the target?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes down to capacity and capacity of officers to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just wondering from that, do you think there's maybe a bigger issue that we don't have the number of staff that we need to deliver in these areas?
So we have an ongoing piece of work with Trim and Change looking at capacity. We had a previous work undertaken as well, so we do know that there are areas where capacity is impacted. But we're waiting the outcomes of that. I think we've seen reductions in staff, so that is going to have an impact. But it's reflected, I think, in other council areas as well. Reductions in staff are ultimately going to impact on certain areas. looking at the priorities of what managers to do and where we maybe need to look at what we stop doing to ensure that these kind of governance controls are top and forefront of what managers should do. But yeah, absolutely, capacity has been an ongoing issue.
Yeah, just thinking about like one that we're coming on to, and it's not started yet, obviously, which came up in the previous report, which is the asbestos management. So asbestos management is obviously extremely serious. It's like something that can cause threat to life. So do you see that as being a sort of priority moving forward?
So in terms of the asbestos management audit that came through, absolutely. So I know our health and safety colleagues have worked at pace with colleagues across the council, so a number of the recommendations that came out of that internal audit report are already in place and already in action. We also have the health and safety executive who are coming in. They've met informally with officers and also with some of our union colleagues who were at that meeting to identify 5 premises. They will narrow that down to 3 and they'll undertake an audit of these 3 buildings. So yeah, it's high on the agenda, it's high on the radar, and our health and safety colleagues are on top of that.
Any other questions? Nope. Just happy to move the paper. Thanks so much, Chris, for the level of detail. I mean, I know it's not a cheerful picture. As an audit and scrutiny committee, obviously, making sure we get back to a full assurance level of governance is extremely important to all of us. And one of the things that we've noted, even in our own sort of review, is that we're not at that stage. So obviously, as a committee, we'll keep a real close eye on where we're moving forward with this and hopefully come to a point where we do have that full insurance, but we do recognise the challenges faced by officers in terms of capacity. So while we do recognise that, we realise that so many areas in this are incredibly important, and we know that we have to kind of keep an overview on it. Anyone want to second? Debate, open to debate. Anyone want to debate the paper? No. Happy to note the paper? Okay. Item 7. So we're coming on to the Management Civil and Integration Joint Board Annual Performance Report to be presented by Wendy Forrest.
Chair, good morning members. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to present our annual performance report from the Health and Social Care Partnership. You will note that this paper relates to last financial year and is coming here for your assurance to ensure that you understand and you are confident that the Integration Joint Board is following the statutory requirements of the Public Bodies Act in terms of the annual reporting. The report that's presented in front of you has already been agreed by the Integration Joint Board. It's also been to Stirling Council and the NHS Board in relation to being signed off for that assurance process. The report relates to each of the priorities within our current strategic commissioning plan, which is a 10-year plan. We are due to review that plan in the coming financial year, and we will do that alongside the budget setting so that we are ensuring that we have a joint process around financial monitoring as well as the performance reporting against the services delegated by Clerk Manager Council into the Integration Joint Board, with the delivery being done through the Health and Social Care Partnership. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, got questions, Councillor Forson?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. For me, it's really odd that you get a report that's like for 23-24 and we're nearly at the end of 24-25. So sometimes questions on the report I think things would probably have moved on. But I noticed in the covering report, the recommendations was for us to note the report. And normally it's note, comment or challenge. And I just wondered whether there's a reason it was just note, because as an audit and scrutiny committee, it's not our job just to kind of note reports. And I guess since we've moved on and we're kind of nearly a year on, I'm not going to focus on the contents of the report, but each of the sections gave us key actions for 24-25. And I was just wondering if we could get an update on where we are in relation to the key actions, because I guess they're not going to be reported to probably this time next year, so it would be good to know where we are with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forson, for your questions, and I can take them in the round. So the noting of the report is because the report governance is that it's approved by the Integration Joint Board. The time lag is unfortunate and it should come, and we would always want to bring it more closely after it's been agreed by the Integration Joint Board for you to see. In terms of the key actions, there is a biennial report that comes through Council, which is about the performance against those key actions in relation to the Clackmannanshire locality of the Health and Social Care Partnership. If there is specific areas you would want to see reflected within that report, I'm very happy to take comments and priorities that you would wish to see us report on. You will understand there is a significant amount of national reporting, of local reporting, as well as locality reporting that we are doing, and we're monitoring our performance within that context alongside the management of our financial reporting. So if there are areas that you feel are not reflected that you would like more information on, I'm very happy to provide that. Thanks.
Just follow up, I suppose it's not particularly anything that I'd like to see reflected, but there are obviously a number of kind of key priorities. I guess I'm looking to see, is there anything that we are not, or the ICB is not expecting to kind of deliver on the key priorities?
Thank you. In terms of our delayed discharges, you'll be aware that we have very positive results in terms of that. We are just embarking on a process of redesign, and we're about to present our delivery plan for the coming financial year into the Integration Joint Board at the end of March. We've had an informal session around primary care and how we work in a more integrated way as part of our communities, and we've got another session planned for September which will focus on the same work around integrated working across our communities. In terms of our February Integration Joint Board, you and the Chief Finance Officer presented our direction of travel around the financial planning, which aligns to those key priorities. And as I say, as part of the review of the integration of the strategic commissioning plan, we will look at those priorities in the coming year. So there is lots of activity. It's unfortunate, again, as you say, that we're looking backwards when actually I think for members within this room you would be seeking for us to be looking forwards. But the nature of this report is that it is for noting and for you to be assured that the requirements of the Act are being met.
And can I ask on mental health and wellbeing, Wendy? And I know this is a report that's sort of out of date now, so things may well have moved on, but I noticed that it said on mental health that the percentage of people who commenced treatment within 18 weeks of referral in psychological therapies was 73.6. It's below the target, but I also wondered, when that's expressed as people starting therapy, does that mean face-to-face, one-to-one therapy, or is it online therapy? Because I know there was a time when people were being referred just onto an online package. Is that counted within that stat, or is it purely face-to-face?
I would need to go back and check with my operational colleagues, Councillor Rennie, in relation to what the detail of that is within that report. I'm happy to provide a briefing in terms of what that looks like operationally.
I think that would be really good, because I know that a lot of people are concerned maybe that it wouldn't be that one-to-one intensive therapy that people require. And I was also wondering, if somebody comes in crisis, say there's been a suicide attempt and they're released from hospital, would they become a priority within mental health services, or would they have to wait in the queue?
Again, I would have to seek the advice of my operational colleagues around just that operational detail, but I'm happy to ask questions and get a briefing to you.
Thanks very much.
I think just worth noting, if I can keep the mic for a moment, I think it's also worth noting that we have a new mental health and wellbeing commissioning plan, which will go to the Integration Joint Board, I think in June for this year, and that will lay out our commissioning intent across that need to shift the balance of care to early intervention, prevention to community support, and to ensure that we're meeting the needs of people exactly as you described within that question.
Questions? Councillor Flynn?
It's a rather trivial one, Wendy. On page 98, the first statistic says the number of emergency admissions for the 18+ bracket has increased for the last 3 years, figure, and is above the target set. How on earth do you set a target for emergency admissions? And how do you control that? Are you rushing around the streets saving people from being run over and things like that?
Thank you, Councillor Coyne, for your question. I think we are looking at targets so that we're managing demand. So it's more about demand management than setting a target specifically around keeping people out of hospital, moving people on. It's about so that we are managing the significant demand that we face.
So perhaps expectation would be a better word than target. I understand that.
Any other questions from anybody? No? Okay, thank you. I'm happy to move the paper. Thank you very much, Wendy, for bringing such a comprehensive report to us. We do note that, as Councillor Morrison said, it's just for us to note, but it's still really useful for us to see the level of work that's going on. So thank you for that. So happy to move the paper. Anyway, do I have a seconder? Yep, Councillor Coyne. People's open to debate. Anybody like to debate the paper? No. We're happy to move the paper? Yep, okay. Moving on to the next item, external audit recommendations, progress report, and that is Chris. We also have Lee and Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning once again, Committee. So this report invites the Committee to note, comment on and challenge Officers' review on the progress of new and ongoing improvement actions arising from external audit recommendations. These recommendations stem from the review of the Council's financial statements up to and including 2023, as well as the 22-23 Best Value Audit, which focused on leadership of the development of new local strategic priorities. As the Committee will recall, the Chief Executive presented a paper to Council in November 2024 outlining an action plan to progress the recommendations from the Best Value report for Clackmannanshire Council. Of the 15 recommendations made through external audit reviews and of their financial statements and Best Value audit, 8 or 54% have been completed, while 7 or 46% remain ongoing. As noted in the cover paper, some of the ongoing actions involve complex and resource-intensive work requiring specialist expertise, skills and capacity. As highlighted in my earlier report, internal resources remain under high demand, which continues to present challenges. Appendix 1 provides a detailed breakdown of all recommendations as of the 30th of September 2024. In summary, the 7 ongoing areas relate to finance team capacity, finance systems of internal control and key support documents, prevention and detection of fraud, financial sustainability budget setting, financial sustainability financial strategy, financial sustainability transformation, and elected member skills analysis. Further updates will continue to be provided to the Committee at future meetings, and Chair, myself and relevant officers, both here and in attendance, are happy to take specific questions.
Any questions, Councillor Coyne?
Thanks, Chair. Page 143, recommendation 6, prevention and detection of fraud and error. The target date was September 2023, and that's been revised to 31st of March 2024. Is that purely a function of capacity, or is this not considered to be something that actually needs a lot of quick action on it? Because it's cheap winnings if you can stop fraud and error.
Absolutely, Councillor Coyne. You'll be aware that currently we don't have a dedicated fraud resource in the Council, and that's something that we're looking at as part of the budget setting process. We obviously have a number of policies, including the revision of the whistleblowing policy, which was approved back in 2023, I think that was approved. We are engaging with our insurers, Gallagher Bassett, to ensure that there's adequate training provided to managers across the organisation. We've seen Aberdeen City Council, where one member of staff over 17 years committed fraud at 4.1 million. So we're very acutely aware of the risk in this area, and that we obviously engage with internal audit, and we focus some of their work as well in some of the areas of risk and concern that we have. But we are aware of it, and there are capacity issues and resource issues which we are looking to deal with and develop a resource. Yeah.
I actually have a meeting this afternoon with Fiona Greenley actually to discuss the fraud training for the Senior Leadership Forum. and the team leadership forum. We're working with Gallagher Bassett, as Chris has said, in terms of a kind of fraud training programme.
Okay, to what extent are the external auditors going to get their hands into the grit of this?
So the external audit ongoing at the moment, Lindsay's probably maybe want to come in on this, but the external auditors will provide the report of the review of the actions as part of the presentation of the financial accounts to Council. In the next few months.
Are the external auditors providing guidance and pointing you in a certain direction, giving you some tricks and things to sort of get around the problem?
So the external auditor is online. This report is obviously the officer's review of these recommendations and the actions that we are taking. External audit will be undertaking their own review. They'll be looking for assurance that actions have been taken on the recommendations that they've highlighted in previous reports. And they will give their review, as I said, in the financial accounts. But I think we have Rebecca online from external audit.
Well, my question to Rebecca then would be, are you giving guidance to the council officer on where they should start looking first and what things they should be looking for, what would set off alarm bells?
We are happy to provide guidance in relation to the common frauds that we are aware of within the sector. Audit Scotland produces quarterly updates which are accessible to anyone to look at the common areas where fraud occurs. We're happy to have a conversation over what we might think the appropriate actions in relation to the recommendation would give us the assurance that has been carried out, and we're happy to work with officers on that.
Thank you. I need to know.
The one for me in terms of paper 143, and there was a discussion on the review of standing orders. And I know this is something we've raised quite a lot in this committee, particularly in view of governance being something that's raised quite frequently. And I know, again, we've talked a lot about capacity, but I see this as being really important because obviously as new councillors, we've been working to the old standing orders which aren't relevant anymore, and I just wondered when this is likely to come forward and be put into action.
Thanks very much, Councillor Rennie. Yeah, capacity has been an issue in terms of trying to turn a lot of this around. The standing orders that we've got at the moment do need refreshed and they do need to be reviewed. For me, it was, in terms of priorities, we had to get the integration scheme finalised. We're nearly there with that, and that impacts then in turn on the scheme of delegation, which is pretty much done other than adding in the aspects of the integration scheme. Then that box will then be ticked, and then it's moving on to standing orders. At the moment, standing orders work. We hold our meetings on a regular basis on the basis of the standing orders that we've got. But I agree that they do need to be refreshed. They haven't been looked at for a while, and certainly I know that Helena sitting next to you has done a considerable amount of work in relation to kind of that review and looking at other local authorities and what we've got compared to it. So I now have a new team leader, Sarah, who hopefully between the two of us will get that moved forward during the course of this year.
And will councillors across different parties be involved in that review of standing orders as well?
We did have a working group that we set up in terms of doing the standing order. So I think basically both Councillor Coyne and Councillor Forson had kind of set me off and said, right, if you can kind of crack on and get that done, and then we can move on, and I would bring it back to the working group.
It would be useful, I think, for some of us from our group as well to be involved in that.
Yeah, that's no problem. I think we did have a working group. I think the problem was that I think some of the meetings ended up, it was pretty much the three of us, but I'm more than happy to, I think there was Councillor Earl maybe, I think that was on it actually. So yeah, you have got representation.
That's good, thank you. So yes, in terms of as well, I mean, across everything, what we're hearing today is lack of capacity. And I know originally one of the things I was glad to see having been addressed there was in the finance team that we've managed to resolve some of that. And looking at, just most of these actions have been met, which is really great to see. Some of them still partially implemented, like things like the financial strategy being developed. But again, I'll just come back to, like, we're really, governance is so important to us as a council. Should we really be looking at how we can, I know you've already mentioned that, Chris, but even in terms of where we put our resources, so when we've got an internal audit recommendation or an external audit recommendation, should we be pulling resources in a sort of crack team, I guess, to sort of make sure that these things are addressed as a matter of priority?
There'll be a number of actions. Obviously, we'll have the revised strategic workforce plan that will be coming forward this year. We've currently got the interim workforce plan coming to an end. Alistair here will be working on the development of the strategic plan. You'll also be aware that the Chief Executive is working on the target operating model, and there's reviews of business support, etc. going on. So hopefully a lot of the work that's ongoing is going to start to look at tackling and putting these things in focus and addressing these through these pieces of work, Councillor.
Councillor Coyne?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, financial sustainability is a thing which crops up all over the place. Just wondering, the comment on page 146 at the bottom is a medium-term financial strategy is being developed. Just wondering if Lindsay is able to give us an update on how that's progressing, if there are any rocks in the road, or do you have an end date in sight?
It's progressing slowly, I have to say, with the other priorities that we're working on, most poignantly the annual budget and the completion of the audit of the annual accounts for 23-24. So whilst we are committed to producing that, it is not moving forward at pace at the moment. And we hope to get moving on that as part of our work plan for March onwards. I don't have a target date at the moment. I would say that a lot of what we intend and expect to include in the medium-term financial strategy is part of our budget strategy. So as we've talked about in the past, there are a lot of things that we've already got developed and that we report to council that will be included in that medium-term financial strategy. And it's more pulling that together and enhancing that with some additional information that we've looked at through other strategies that we've seen, and also through the Audit Scotland reports as well on that. So I can't give you a date at the moment, but it will be picked up again at more pace after the budget's set for this year.
Not even a hint of a date.
The 25-26 financial year, it will come forward.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got one more, Chair. Thanks. Fine. Page 150. Right. This is to do with elected members here. Training for elected members is a continual professional requirement through their time as a local councillor. Down at the bottom, third line, fourth line from the bottom, it says, members who want to engage. There's a conflict there, is there not? I mean, either it's required or it's voluntary. It can't be both.
I don't know, Alistair, if you want to come up and talk about the skills assessment. So I think in terms of the voluntary aspect, the skills assessment for elected members has recently been launched. That in itself is voluntary, and that members, we would hope and encourage all members to do it. I think we've only had about 4 signed up at the moment, but obviously, like everybody in professional life, there's a requirement, I suppose, to continually develop your skill set. Obviously, we're looking to provide that training to elected members. For the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, we've got an agreed plan that we are working through for that, but the skills assessment should hopefully inform training going forward as well.
Yep, again, Chris pretty much covered it in the time that I've taken to walk up there. But yeah, I mean, there is a requirement in any professional role to be as effective as possible to undertake training and continual professional development. But Chris is right in terms of what we can ask of elected members. It is very much a voluntary process that you enter into. Now, we've seen that there is an audit recommendation to undertake training needs analysis of elected members. We've decided to take a route which is a lot more nuanced and detailed with that, which is the political skills assessment. which is informed by the Improvement Service, which takes a much more detailed approach based on facilitated face-to-face discussions. It is, however, a voluntary process to enter into, but entering into that voluntary process is really beneficial, not just for elected members to have those conversations to identify what your training and skills requirements might be, but it also helps officers develop that wider training plan that we can create for all elected members going forward to ensure that you have the appropriate aptitudes and skills within that role as best as possible. And that sits as part of a much wider landscape of development for elected members, which can include engaging in improvement service webinars, which are available. But again, that's all on a voluntary basis. It's up to individual elected members how much they engage within that process.
Can I just say as well, just on the back of that, I mean, obviously it's in this quite clearly, which was important, that audit and scrutiny by SIPA requirements had to put a training plan in place. I mean, we wanted to, but we had to do that under SIPA requirements. And we're taking this really, really seriously. But actually decision making happens at full council level. We can debate and we can, you know, really go over papers, but we don't make the decisions in this committee. So I would see that surely this is something that's equally as important for full council as it is for, in fact, more important for full council than it is for audit and scrutiny. And should that not be a requirement the way it was for us as a group?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Chair. I think there is a requirement that every elected member engages in continual professional development in order to upskill within their roles, and certainly taking the learning that we have from the audit and scrutiny training plan and anticipating hopefully what will be the success of the political skills assessment going forward. That absolutely could be something that we roll out further. And I think it probably should be rolled out further on that basis, but we will await the feedback as we go through the process with the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. But even just this morning, I think even having the feedback from yourself from the training session that was undertaken with Judy earlier in the week and from your colleagues around the chamber is really useful, because it demonstrates the benefit that these training sessions can have for yourself and your colleagues in your role, different roles within council.
All the different skills, I mean, because obviously, Dennis and myself are accountants, so we're more likely to sort of have knowledge in that area, but I must admit areas like planning, I don't have the same knowledge, so it's good to, we're commenting on every paper, so it's good for us to have training in every area, even if it's not a particular area of interest. So do you think that we might be doing a sort of, I know you were sort of touching on a skills audit, but maybe even recognising in full council where the gaps are, because you notice the papers that there's literally no questions on. So would that then indicate which ones might be important for covering?
Yeah, I agree, and it absolutely would, yeah. But again, I emphasise the point that, particularly with the political skills assessment, that would be your vehicle to identify where those gaps might be and what are the important elements that we need to take forward. Again, the key point with that, though, is that is an entirely voluntary process that is undertaken by elected members. So I'm almost taking the opportunity to promote that again, and the door remains fully open for elected members to engage within that. The more elected members that we can have that can engage in that process, the better the information that we have to inform those plans going forward. So I really would urge elected members, if they can, to engage in that process with us.
Others may be very annoyed with me, but I think it should be mandatory. And just simply because we're looking here about, I'm going to put this to a question eventually, but like, while we're looking here at significant issues within our internal and external audit that we need to address, we're the ones that are making the governance decisions on these aspects. Should it not be mandatory for us to go to that training?
In my professional opinion, I think it is incredibly important within such an important role within the council for training to be taken in that serious manner, but it would be completely out with my purview to say whether or not it should be mandatory.
Thank you. Very well answered. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to come in there as well, Councillor Benny. In terms of the planning that you just mentioned, we did run a planning training session for elected members, which was well received by those who attended, and then those who then subsequently reviewed it. I'm more than happy to share that with any other elected members who are not necessarily on the planning committee. It's been recorded, and I certainly think it was exceptionally beneficial when it came to the planning committee decision in relation to the wellbeing hub.
Yes, please, Lee, that would be great, thank you.
I would maybe just also add in terms of general overall training, obviously we developed the induction programme for elected members as a phase 1 training, and we're looking to develop that further into a phase 2 programme as well, so we're learning and continually in relation to the development and training of our members, which is important.
Thanks. My question is predicated on my belief that we are reasonably well paid for what we do. It's a great responsibility that people have placed on us to do the job. We sit here in judgment, and if we don't have the skills to judge, what are we doing sitting here? Is there anything, and this is a question for Lee really, is there anything in our contract that indicates that we should be skilled to an acceptable standard in some way in what we do?
Sorry, there is no contract that you have with the council, you're duly elected members under law, but no, but I think going back to Ali's point, you know, you obviously are recognising the fact that you are decision makers, and that it is really important that, you know, the training that is there, that's offered, is taken up to allow you to continue to do your roles.
Maybe also add into that, as Lee has alluded to, obviously we can mandate our employees to undertake mandatory training, because as an employer, obviously you are elected by your constituents. We are engaging quite heavily now with the Improvement Service. The Improvement Service offer an awful lot of training for elected members to take up. So there's an awful lot of training out there that members can take up at any time. So we're going to try and maybe formalise some of that. In terms of whether it's mandatory or not, we could maybe leave that to the leaders of each political party to direct their groups.
Thank you. We will. Any other questions? No. Okay. Happy to move the paper. Glad to see that many of these recommendations have been met, most of them actually, so that's really positive to see moving forward. I would just say, you know, as part of the debate, really, that as we've said before, we are getting these recommendations. It would be really useful for our committee to see the audit report and annual accounts prior to them being approved. So again, I'll just stress that I think that should be, I mean, I don't know if it's on our plan, but I think that's something that should happen moving forward for us to be able to properly scrutinise, so that we're seeing things before they get to this stage, if that would be possible. So that's just what I'm happy to move.
Just on that point, I think we are looking to take the accounts to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee to note a comment on. They have to go to council, they're presented to council for formal approval, but yeah, we're building that in, that they will come for review, but to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee.
Excellent. Anyone happy to second? Or?
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Errol. So are we...
Chair, can I just make a comment? 1 second in the paper.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
A lot's been made here this morning about the issue of training. I attended a seminar yesterday, and it was on, I think it's planning? No. It was out here, I can't remember. But one of the important things that was brought up on the training seminar was the issue of training, and the need for every organisation to be looking internally at the training to allow the members to carry out the duties to a reasonable standard. Dennis talked here about the employee contract. Well, we don't actually have an employee contract, but we have the public expectation that when you're making these decisions, particularly on planning issues, things that are really going to affect people's lives, that we should know a bit about what we're talking about. There's a licensing forum, that's keep back to it. Now that was talking about taxes and all the foibles that involve the taxes, but it just shows just how complicated a simple thing on the surface can look at, but once you start drilling down, we can find out just how complicated it is. From the licensing board point of view, early days, Lee and I had a discussion about training and the need for training. And it shows that no matter how good or how skilled or how experienced you think you are, we could always do that extra refresher training they can point out things that we actually think we know. But it actually shows just our level of knowledge. So, as far as training is concerned, I don't think that any elected member should be wary of having to undergo training. It's not a threat to the individual's knowledge. It's actually going to enhance their knowledge. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else like to debate the paper? No, we're happy to note the paper.
Yep.
Thank you very much. So we are now moving on to partnership and performance, half-year business plan update. I know you're all there for that again as well.
Thank you, Chair, and again, once again, committee. So this report invites the committee to note, comment on and challenge the half-year progress update for the 24-25 Partnership and Performance Business Plan approved by Council in August 2024, outlining the progress as of the 30th of September last year. Our portfolio continues to play a vital role in coordinating and managing response efforts, transformation initiatives and business as usual activities. Our work spans a number of key areas, including emergency planning, business continuity, major incident response, communications, health and safety, governance, HR, payroll, finance and revenues, together with legal and IT, alongside a contribution to the Council's transformation programme. A comprehensive overview of our progress as of the 30th of September 2024 is provided in Appendix 1, with key highlights from each service area detailed within the main report. Chair, myself and senior managers from across the Directorate are happy to take any specific questions.
Yeah, there's a bit in the business plan about responding to major incidents, and we have had a couple of major incidents in kind of recent months in Courtmansshire. And I know that whilst they were not necessarily, kind of council-related incidents, our staff have had to play a part in that. I was just wondering really if there was any kind of lessons learned from these incidents and anything that was considered that we would change as a result of that.
Yes, so we conduct formal debriefs when there's been any significant incident. So we would do that depending on the incident as a multi-agency approach, and often we might do an internal debrief as well. So the whole purpose of that is to review what went well, what didn't go so well, what would we want to do differently the next time. So it's part of our formal process. The other thing we do is exercise. So under legislation, we are required to exercise on a number of themed exercises. So we do that as a way of learning, developing plans and how we would respond to real-life incidents too.
Maybe just come in on that, and just to follow up, obviously, the incidents that you mentioned, obviously we had the tragic incident at Kelly Place, and we've had a recent incident this weekend, but also the recent storm. And I think the officers that stood up have been remarkable in terms of the response. And there are lessons learned, but from right across the council, there is significant efforts that our officers have done. And I'm not sure we'll get the opportunity, but obviously we are losing Karen Kirkwood, the emergency resilience officer is retiring, who's going to be a very hard act to follow and a lot of experience leading the council. But we have recruited, but there's an awful lot of knowledge there that unfortunately will be leaving us.
Thanks very much, Chair. Ali, this is one for you. 3.11, in operational HR, the appointment of an absence compliance officer is expected to enhance the management, etc., etc. This is a particular interest of mine, as Chris is aware. Will we receive regular updates to assess the effectiveness of this officer's work?
So we can provide regular updates through the reporting that comes to Audit and Scrutiny anyway. There are absence figures that are provided within the annex of this report itself, and it is reported regularly through the business planning processes. So you would expect to see year-on-year trends, anticipated improvements with the effectiveness of that role, should it be effective, and that would be the usual place where we'd see reporting.
Okay, it talks about taking a more proactive role in it. How do you see that? What's the more proactive role?
So, as discussed at previous Audit and Scrutiny committees, and this is a particular interest of you, Councillor Coyne, we do have quite robust policies and processes in place which deal with absence management. A lot of the emphasis to date does sit with management though, so HR step in the formal processes where they were required, but in the first instance, management of individual absences is undertaken by line managers. What this post intends to do is where triggers are met, there will be an intervention from that absence compliance officer to ensure that all reasonable steps are being taken to support that staff member in coming back to work as soon as possible. And those are the kind of more proactive steps from the HR side that we would expect to see resulting in people coming back to work in sooner or as soon as they possibly can. So that's more the proactive kind of area that we're looking at.
And maybe, sorry, just coming on that as well, so there's also improvements in terms of providing guidance, training and support to managers, so whether that's improving occupational health referrals and the information that we're looking to receive back, or ensuring that return to works are actually, we have seen in the past that, a return to work should be done ideally within 1 or 2 days of the individual returning. We've seen that at times that's not actually taking place. So it's that more proactive intervention in stepping up and supporting and guiding the managers to ensure they're following our processes, which ultimately will hopefully lead to a reduction in the overall absence level. However, we have seen, when we compare ourselves with other councils, we are far ahead in a number of things we have. We have a wellbeing strategy, we have our absence policies, we have a lot of support measures, we have mental health, we have a healthy working lives group. But we are still at the very bottom of the LGBF reporting. A small council, small teams, one person goes off for a longer time, has a significant impact on the average FTE days lost. So when we're comparing that, we're a smaller council, and we know that other councils, we're not all comparing like we're like. So sometimes we have to take with a pinch of salt some of the figures that are reported through some of the report mechanisms when we do have an awful lot of support and measures in place to support our staff.
Totally accept that. I also accept that people being off ill is an inevitable thing. We've got to deal with that. But at least if someone's off ill for a period, you can make a plan around that. What you can't plan for is somebody just not turning up. It's more those kind of absences I would be expecting to see. That's more of a manageable kind of absence than someone being off ill. You have no control over that. So I'd be interested to see the kind of tactics and effects of that. And I think I've said before, in the reporting of absences, just to give a single figure doesn't tell the story, for the reasons I've just mentioned. And I've said before, it'd be quite useful to see how many of the absences were signed off, by a medical practitioner, how many were casual. I think that would tell a story in a very different way, and it would give us something to focus on.
So maybe if I can come on that, you'll recall possibly we do report through the tripartite our absence figures, and within there we do report on short-term and long-term absence. Any absence over 7 calendar days does require to be medically certificated. You can self-certify for up to the 7 days, which you're aware. So anything over the 7 days must have a medical certificate, and we have that in place. And I've now completely lost my train of thought. In terms of, so we do report a tripartite, and we give a breakdown in terms of the reasons where minor illness continues to be far and away the most significant cause of absence across the council. But we know that can mask things in terms of people maybe not reporting the real reason thereof. Stress, work-related distress is very low down on our absence rates. But it's just for the assurance that we are giving detail on the breakdown between unions and elected members through different committee and forum in relation to absence.
I'm glad you came in with that, Chris, in terms of stress being really low, because I noticed also one that really needed to be treated was the kind of staff engagement side and the staff survey. So I was wondering, like, in a later on report, there was some sort of level of staff dissatisfaction. Now, when that comes up in surveys, do you then have an action in place to take that forward and work with staff to, particularly if it's one team that's really unhappy and you see that, do you do work with that team to improve the wellbeing within them?
I'll take your questions from the last backwards there. There is a level of anonymity and confidentiality that sits within the staff survey, which doesn't always allow us to go down to team level. But what we can see is, as a general picture and directorate level, what those issues might be. Now, just to address your comment as to whether if certain themes are identified, can we directly address those? Yes, and we have done so. So within the interim workforce strategy for 2023 to 25, a number of the actions that are within that strategy come directly from the results of the staff survey. And the themes that are identified through that are identified through officers working in conjunction with trade unions as well. And those will feed into elements such as the reconstitution of the Healthy Working Lives Group, which just as of this week is looking at ways in which we can emphasise, because of the time of the year, how to mitigate stress in the workplace and within home life as well. So there definitely is a feed through from that staff survey level to the strategies that we take within HR and workforce development that then goes wider into bespoke pieces of work, such as with the Healthy Working Lives Group.
It's good to see that group's established again. I know it's something we used before. Sorry, Councillor Coyne, I've cut across you there because I was asking a follow-up, but do you have any other questions on that?
That's your prerogative, Chair. No, yes, I have actually, thanks. A quick one for Lindsay. Is the financial revenues team now complete? All chairs filled?
So revenues is ongoing. We still have a couple of vacancies, and that's not really due wholly to the restructure. We've had some fluctuations through turnover, retirement, etc. through the team. In finance, similarly, so we had focused and we reported on 2 posts that we'd filled that had been long-standing posts that we're now filled. However, we are experiencing other turnover and retirements more in the management accountancy side, which are significant for us. So whilst we are doing a lot of action to fill the chairs, the empty chairs, it is still quite challenging for recruitment, especially these specialised roles. So we're moving ahead with the actions that we had said we would take forward, and we've got the phase 1 of the restructure, and we're looking towards phase 2. But we've got these other challenges in other areas that have come up that weren't foreseen, and that we're actively recruiting to those posts as well.
Thanks. A partnership transformation 3.18, just a little question on customer satisfaction. 86% of all calls made to the contact centre were answered. Sounds quite good, it's a big number. 14% of them weren't answered. What happens to unanswered calls? Do they go dead? Do they get sent to an answer phone? Do they get a chance to leave a message and have an email sent back? How are the 14% handled?
So those 14% would be calls where the person has chosen to end the call. That might be because the wait was longer, although we do have short waiting times for calls. However, that is where the call has been ended by the caller. We do not have an answer machine. We have manned customer contact lines 9 to 5, and then out of hours pick up out with those hours. So we always have call lines manned. So that explains 14%.
It does indeed. Do you have a shunt system whereby if the first responder doesn't respond, it gets shunted on to second and so on? And how long is that chain?
Yes, we do. I couldn't tell you how long it is. Can certainly ask the team the question, but yeah, the calls go from one call handler to the next automatically.
Legal and governance, 3.22. Yeah, just wondering about the date for completion of the, what is it talking about? Sure what that question's about. I was in date for completion question mark. I don't see what they're talking about. Forget that for the moment. Oh, that's fine. We've answered that one already. Okay.
Any other questions?
Hold on.
Spoke too soon.
Oh, yeah. Okay, page 160, second bottom item. The percentage of the highest paid 5% of earners among council that are women. What's the relevance of that? Oh, sorry.
I think this is a question you ask quite regularly in this committee, Councillor Coyne. This is a national measure, and it's to try and get a balance of a gender balance on organisations that are subject to equalities duties.
Gender's got nothing to do with intelligence or aptitude or ability. Nonsense, that whole thing.
We're going to fall out.
I think that's probably me for the sake of my life. It's just joking.
Yeah. Sorry, just give me a second. Oh, yeah, complaints, sorry, it says on page 161 now, bottom section. Customer results, just looking at how serious was the complaint that was upheld? It was just one complaint, was it? Yeah. Service responded to 6 stage 1 complaints with 1 upheld. Just wondering how serious that was. If it's a major system failure or just a minor infringement. No details will be available, I suppose. Just general comment.
I don't have detail on that specific complaint. I did review them when I updated this part of the report, but I can't remember which complaint that was. However, stage 1 complaints for P&P tend to be things like information, calls not handled, maybe somebody's been spoken to in a way that's not been acceptable. So it might be, I can certainly provide more detail on that particular complaint, but it might have been something that we've not done and we've admitted that problem and fixed it. But stage 1 tend to be lower level complaints, so it's not significant matters.
Thanks.
Again, I'm happy to move this report. It's thanks for all of you attending as well to answer, but it's been really comprehensive for us. It didn't leave me with a lot of questions because it was really well put together. So yes, thank you very much for that, and I think it's been a really useful report for the committee with the right balance in it. So thank you for that. If we've got a seconder, Councillor Errol, want to say anything? Open to debate, and I'd like to debate the paper. Happy to note the paper. Thanks very much, everybody. Interim report, People, Community Wellbeing Plan 2024-25, and that will be Lorraine Sander and team. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Chair. I'm joined by some of my colleagues, and others are still in the seats because there's probably too many of us to sit at the top table. So this is the People Directorate update plan for 24-25, the 6-monthly plan. As presented previously to Council, we have combined our business planning within a one-plan report format, which we call the People Community Wellbeing Plan, but it does comply with business planning guidance as well. But it does incorporate all our planning and activity. Probably I should say I'm also joined by Shan Robertson and Scott. I've just seen their faces pop up online, so they're also here. Thank you. I should say there's an error in
the proposal in the recommendations, it should actually say that it's recommended that audit and scrutiny comment and challenge on the report rather than council approves the report. So that was a typo in the first page. We'll get that corrected. Apologies for that. What I would just highlight before go into detail and then take some questions is just once again present the rationale for the way that we have developed this report. So it's very much focused on outcomes and outcomes for our communities. It aligns with the council priorities, and the format is explained within the reporting papers that you have in front of you. So the outcomes, the set of outcomes that we work to, and then our activity sits under those, and you have the Quintana report on that activity. There's a summary in the covering paper of some of the main areas of progress. It's some of the highlights, but not all, but also in paragraphs 5 to 5.6, it highlights some of the challenges also that the People Directorate faces, and some of those you've heard today in previous papers and previous discussions. So I'm just happy to take any questions. That's probably the best use of our time. Thank you, Chair.
Wilson.
Yeah, thanks. I have a couple of questions. I suppose this is a new way of reporting, and it's probably we're the first council to kind of look at it this way. I suppose we're 6 months in. Are there any things that are kind of popping out as a result of the change? You know, are there any particular challenges or anything that you're thinking about refining as we move forward? Thank you, Councillor Corson. It's an excellent question. Yeah, it's quite ambitious, I would say, in terms of what we've tried to do in trying to combine what it has already highlighted is if you focus on outcomes, there are other partners and other parts of the council that contribute to those outcomes. And so the step that we had agreed with council back in August was that we would try and expand that across the council. So, for example, I've highlighted employability and homelessness. So if we're trying to tackle poverty, how do those two areas contribute to that? So there is a challenge as to how much we combine into this and how much it then overlaps with the LOIP in particular. So I think that is something that we still need to work through. And how much do we reflect partner contribution into the plan? We have incorporated partner contribution into the plan, but again, that's a challenge because partners necessarily don't see it as their contribution to council plans. They see it to perhaps the LOIP or their own plans. So that they are challenges that we've already identified. The interesting thing for me in terms of progress is to note how quickly other local authorities are interested in what we're doing. So we are continuously contacted by other local authorities who want to know how we've done this. Cathy Forsyth, who's our analyst, who's here just now, is also working with the Improvement Service to help them understand the mapping exercise that we undertook to achieve this. I've been in meetings this week with Scottish Government colleagues who see it as part of their public sector reform approaches. So it's to streamline, to reduce the burden, to make it more effective, and to absolutely give elected members, the public and ministers, necessarily Scottish Parliament, outcome-focused data rather than just activity. So what tends to happen is a lot of plans are focused on this is what we did, this is what we did, all these lists of things. This is different. It's very much about how will you know that we're achieving those outcomes and what's the activity. So I don't think we've cracked it. I think there's more for us to do, but certainly from the feedback that I'm getting, particularly nationally and from other colleagues across the country, is that this is the direction of travel that everybody across Scotland will be taking. Got another couple of questions, if that's okay. There's a little bit in there about improvement pupil attainment, and I think it's great. We're seeing kind of record results in Club Manager. That's just focused, I suppose, on the last year. I was just wondering, sometimes it's better to see kind of data as a stretch, and I was kind of wondering what the achievements in that have been, say, perhaps over a 5-year period.
Yeah, I could just draw attention. It was the Scottish Government published data in December that came out, and it looked at trends from 2016 to now. If I just look at the primary information, primary school information, it was really interesting information, whereby from 2016 to now for literacy, we would have took the largest step forward of all our authorities other than one, and that being Orkney Islands. So we're really, really proud of that
step that we've took from 2016. We might have been starting at a lower point than some authorities, but it just shows you the effort and the amount of progress we made for literacy. For numeracy, similar picture. If we pull all our P1 to P7 information, compare 2016 to now, it would be the third most biggest step for numeracy. So they are just two examples. If I could just indulge and talk about secondary as well. A key level is a level 4 performance. Within that, for numeracy, we would be number 1, as in taking the biggest step from 2016 to now for numeracy, and literacy would be the second most. So it's a significant improvement in attainment. But I would say that to do that, the approaches in our schools have been focused differently in some areas. It has been looking at the well-being of young people, it has been chasing up attainment, it has been focused on the promise. So it's not just what happens on pedagogy, but that is important. It has been that holistic support that's making a difference, we feel.
I think it's great to see that coming through, because we always said that when wellbeing was being addressed, the attainment would follow some years later. So it's good to be getting to that stage. Sorry, that's not really a question, but I just wanted to say that. But my questions really are, in terms of looking at trauma-informed approaches. So there was a comment in the report that progress has been made in implementing trauma-informed approaches, but not fully achieved, and I just wondered what plans were in place to address that.
Leslie Taylor's our principal educational psychologist and leads that work. So Leslie, can you answer that question for us?
Thank you, Councillor Rennie, for that.
Sorry. Yeah, it's ongoing because it's a long-term piece of work. We've had funding coming from the government for the last 3 years, and we've got a programme of training in place looking at how we support the entire council workforce, including hopefully elected members. I was interested in hearing the interest in ongoing training and development for elected members. So that's at the trauma-informed level. We're also moving that into more skills and specialist work through the readiness for caring approach that we're developing with social work staff, residential care workers, foster carers. So these are things that are going to take us time to be able to achieve, because some of this training is to quite a high level, and we're trying to move to being a sustainable model. So we want to allow staff within the council to get to train the trainer levels. So there's an element of time needed to actually do that work, to then implement some things, to then go on and do the train for trainer element of that. So it takes us a bit of time. We've got just over 2,000 hours of CLPL planned for the staff that are accessing readiness for caring over the next year, and we're hoping that that'll be something, like I say, that becomes self-sustaining. I don't have the figure to hand, but we've got a high number of our managers who've accessed the trauma-informed training at that most basic level. Again, there's a need to keep going with that, as it's workforce turnover and things like that, but it's certainly something that we're making really good progress with, I would say.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Forson, I think I cut in the middle of you there, and if you've got other questions. Yeah.
Right, thank you. And I wanted to ask a question around about the promise. We're saying this report is focused on more outcomes rather than the activity. So in this little section here, we've kind of included some of the activities that we've been doing around about the promise. And I'm just really wondering what the impact that has been, and what difference this work, the other work that's going on, is actually having to our young people.
Sharon, I don't know if you want to come in. There's some significant improvements, I think, overall in terms of how this work is contributing to outcomes.
Yeah, Joanne's going to come up. So Lorraine, I've just messaged Joanne, because she's the lead for our promise work, so she's got more of a closer update, but happy to also comment if required. Thanks.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? It was around outcomes, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. It was kind of, there's a description of the work that's going on. So if we are focusing more on outcomes, just really what impact that work is having on our young people. Yeah. I think, firstly, it's probably helpful to recognise just how broad the promise is in terms of we have, work streams within the local authority that are specific to the promise, but we also have work streams across all the people directorate that, all meet the outcomes in relation to the promise in terms of poverty, in terms of family support, early intervention. We have been working with our partners. I know that's something that we've discussed before in Audit and Scrutiny, and through sort of workshop and consultation with our partners, we've developed shared outcomes within our existing promise plan that we wish to really collectively focus on. So one of these outcomes, there's 4 key areas that have been identified, one being support to the workforce, which Leslie's just spoken about in terms of readiness for learning and readiness for caring. So these are trauma-informed suites of training, if you like, that are aligned with readiness for learning that you will already know about within education. And that is really to upskill and strengthen and create capacity within our workforce, both of our social work workforce, but also our community of caregivers, whether that's fostering families, adopted families, or within our residential houses. So when we think about outcomes, we're early in that process. But we have started some of that early adoption in Woodside in our children's house, and progressing this further is allowing us to roll out that training whole scale across the whole team. So what we are seeing through the early adoption of some of those training and some of that approaches is being able to, for example, Woodside has a very low rate of children who leave on an unplanned basis, or of placement breakdowns. And we also have a remarkably low rate of use of physical intervention, which is a key area of the promise in comparison to some of our external providers of essential care. So when we think about outcomes, we can see at an early stage that line of work around that training and development of staff is effective. And what it's doing is creating a consistent approach for children and their families. So when they're at school, they're receiving the same language or same approaches, whether it's in foster care, residential care, or indeed some of the early help that will be provided out to kinship carers and families within the community. So that's one example. I won't take up too much time, but the other priorities are around scaffolding, around youth justice, and support to young people that are coming into conflict with the law, and also our support to caregivers who are leaving care and moving on, and you're aware of the work that's been done in relation to partnership with the Vardy Foundation and to try and increase their range of support and accommodation for caregivers.
Follow-up. Thank you. I suppose the promise is probably quite fresh in my mind because there was all the kind of stuff in Parliament yesterday, and COSLA today has just issued a statement about local authorities being committed to delivering on the promise. And this is quite a loaded question, I guess. As a promise champion, I'm thinking, there were many views on this. Is there anything else that we can be doing as elected members that would support the work on that? And are we getting the support that we need from our partners to be delivering the promise? Because it's not just a local authority responsibility.
I think there's always more that the elected members can do in terms of support the promise that we are the corporate parents for these children and young people, and we all, not just you, Councillor Forson, but everybody needs to champion because many of these children do not have a champion, whether it's their mum or dad or their auntie or uncle or whatever. So what I would say that elected members from a very practical perspective can do is in your daily work, what you are doing, ask the questions. And if it turns out that somebody is care experienced, what more can we be doing? Because they deserve to be able to have a higher box than everybody else. So it's not about equality and making sure that they get the same, they actually need more. And I think we need to challenge ourselves, our services and the portfolios on a daily basis. We certainly do. in terms of the work that we do. So our colleagues are used to us in housing or in another part of the council saying, well, actually that's not good enough, we need to do more. And that's what I think as elected members I would ask that you all do and could do is continue to challenge, particularly when it's a care experienced young person involved. Quite often young children grow up to be young adults, and we forget that they've had a care experience background, so employability is another area. So they don't, the same rules in some ways should not apply. We need to be going over and above if we're actually going to get the best outcomes for those children, young people. And I think even in the justice system and in other areas of the council, we're continually trying to champion those possibilities. So that's what I would think councillors could do. The second part is in terms of partners. We have a similar challenge. We have a very good Children's Services Partnership, which Sharon chairs. I'll bring Sharon in a minute. But I do think we've never really cracked, in my own view, a real collaborative approach to the promise. And that's not just Clackmannanshire. I think a lot of everybody has their promise plan, whether it's police, whether it's health, whatever. It's the work and seeing that together. So we've definitely made strides. The early help work that Gillian leads has definitely seen some real promise and some real results actually in people getting help much earlier and families getting help much earlier, and that's very much a partnership approach with the third sector and with our alliance partners. But we could be doing more. So I think we just need to keep it on the agenda and keep talking about it and thinking what more we can do. Sharon, I can see you want to come in.
Yeah, it was just to just highlight again, Joanne is there as the lead. She chairs our promise. So we've got our multidisciplinary promise plan, as you're aware of. So it's not just a council promise plan, it's multidisciplinary. So Joanne is the lead, chairs that delivery group, and it is actually made up of multi-agency partners. So we do scrutinise the work of the promise delivery through our Children Young People strategic group to ensure that everyone collectively is progressing and improving better impact and outcomes for our care experienced children, young people. But most importantly, it is also, like I say, I don't know if everybody's seen the COSLA letter that's just gone out. I did ask to circulate it when it came into my email box this morning. But as Councillor Forson's saying, is actually about everybody involved across our partnership within our council, education, housing, our children's services, our finance services. It's everybody within the council. It doesn't just traditionally sit within social work, and it's about everybody working collectively together. And we are seeing some improvements, and I think we can bring back a more focused report on the promise work, on the actual promise plan, if that maybe provides a bit more scrutiny around some of the key elements within that promise delivery plan as well. I know it's highlighted within this report, but there is actually a lot of work that's going on behind that. So we're happy to bring a more focused report if that would provide some more assurance around what we're all doing collectively.
I was just following up from some of that, because I was just thinking about it. One of my questions had been on the UNCRC implementation and, looking at child-friendly policies and complaints and all of that moving forward so that children have their voice. And I know we have brought to council before a sort of child-friendly paper. I mean, are there plans to do more of that? Because, don't get me wrong, I'm not presuming a lot of children will be brighter than me, right? So, basically, and there are a lot of adults who have significant challenges in terms of dyslexia, other sort of difficulties. Is there a plan moving forward? And also, not just that, the engagement with young people, because I think it would be great for us as councillors to actually meet groups of young people to tell us what we should be doing, because basically they'll have a lot of views and a lot of opinions. And I think that's maybe a bit of a gap where we could have more engagement as councillors with young people. So, and I know maybe the administration already do that, but across sort of areas, I wonder if that would be something that would be considered.
I'll bring Colin in a minute in terms of the young people's voice, because I think that's we've got a very active forum now in terms of young people, and they're very good and able to tell us what they think and what we should be doing, so absolutely. But in terms of UNCRC and implementation, so any new policies that are developed by the council or any updated policies need to have that kind of child-friendly, it needs to go through the lens of UNCRC, and that is a requirement of all parts of the council now. So we should see that coming through from all different directorates. Housing, I think, have led the way, Murray and the team there, in terms of having that child-friendly policy, but we would expect to see more of that coming through from other directorates. Katrina Scott leads on some of that work, although it's not about People Directorate, it's about the whole of the council taking that forward. Colin, I don't know if you want to add a bit more.
Yeah, I think your question, I'm absolutely the same page. So if it's children and young people having a voice in some of our key plans and policies, I think they're absolutely vital. I've certainly seen an increase in that in recent years. Young people engaging in different directorates across the authority and different teams to help shape complaints policies, help shape the LOIP and things like that. However, I do feel if there's more opportunity to that, absolutely. What we've been trying hard to do is to make sure that Youth Forum is a really diverse and big group of young people, so we can get a better representation of the voice of young people. I think when it comes to aspects of budget, aspects of plans, that increase in depth of knowledge and viewpoints helping us. But I suppose your question, do I agree with it? I agree with having it more. For me, it's now how to go away and make sure if other groups are getting opportunities to access that and make best use of that. So I'd be quite interested to continue that discussion with you. I think we've covered the NCRC.
Oh, that's great, thanks very much. Scott, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just to add to that as well, in terms of children's voice, I think it's important to highlight as well in the redesign of youth justice and a potential for a youth justice court being reintroduced into Clickmannanshire. We are working in partnership with CYCJ, Strathclyde University, and part of that is bringing in those with care experience that are currently in the justice system with youth justice and those who have experienced it as well. And I think that's a key element moving forward with the key areas that we're addressing in Clickmannanshire as well. So another opportunity for voices to be heard through that forum as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Coyne.
Thanks. Yeah, just keeping up with that question of engagement with care and experience and elected members doing so, I'm kind of trying to think about my day and daily as a councillor and how I'm going to trip over that and how I'll recognise the situation where I'm dealing with someone who's care experience. You can't go asking everybody, are you care experienced? There has to be a way, presumably, of recognising likely situations or whatever that might ring that alarm bell in my mind. I think maybe I should investigate this.
I'll ask Joanne to give her thoughts on that, because I think it's a very thought-provoking question, to be honest, because absolutely we don't want to walk about and stigmatise or draw attention to young people who quite often don't want that attention to put upon them. But I think often situations arise where we know that people are disadvantaged or who are needing support, and through that mechanism I think there is an opportunity to be a bit more direct, because I think, and I'm using housing in a positive way here, not in a negative way, colleagues who are sitting in chairs behind, but we know that that's an easier one in some ways, because we know that care experienced young people should have specific rights in terms of access to accommodation, and therefore it's a positive result that we're trying to aim for. So I think in situations where we're trying to help somebody and trying to explore all the opportunities that are available to them, it's okay to be able to try and, so we have a young parenting project, for example, which is covered by People Directorate, and we help young mums who become pregnant at a younger age than the norm. And many of those young women are care experienced, and that is a question that we would ask,
because they have additional rights, they have additional financial support. So I suppose that's a possibility when you're trying to help constituents, you know, to be able to ask that question. I think it's appropriate. Joanne, I think I'd ask you to expand a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two threads that we can think about in response to that question.
Just keep closer to it.
Oh, apologies. So there's what Lorraine has already said in terms of that we have that mindfulness of some of the additional rights that care experienced people have and our duties and responsibilities towards them, and these might present in situations around housing or needing additional support around living independently or access and support with employment. However, I think what I'd probably come back to is that when we think about the promise, it's not just about our care experienced population. So when we think about the promise and what you could do as elected members, Leslie spoke about the trauma-informed training, and you know that's something that we should be mindful of in all of our interactions, because we don't know the backgrounds of people that live in our community. They may be care experienced through the council or you know from other local authorities, or they may not have been care experienced, but they may have you know experienced some of that same trauma and have similar needs for support. And I guess it sort of links into what I said around when we're thinking of the promise, we're not just thinking about those who have reached that stage where we have involvement and children are becoming looked after by the council, but also that importance of early help, isn't it, for whether it's for adults, you know, families, individuals, and trying to signpost people to the right services and supports at the right time. And I know as elected members you do a lot of that signposting as well.
Another question. Noreen, the success of this big plan depends hugely on cooperation with the other organisations with whom you're working, does it not? Given that, there's an inherent risk in that it fails. How big is the risk, and what plan B have you in mind if there is one?
Absolutely, to get things right for our individuals in our communities, to tackle some of the most challenging issues that we have in our communities, and to ensure that we have sustainable public services, all of those big aims that we have as a council, and depend on partnership and collaboration. So it's not just unique to this plan. I think it's unique to the council, and it's unique to local government and national government. So it's not as if we will fail because we can't get police and health and the third sector to work with us. There is an increasing understanding that we can only succeed if everybody works together, and particularly with the finances, which we've heard about today, and a little bit in the challenges we have with capacity. To me, the only way forward is for us to increase that level of collaboration and to think who's best placed, or individually or collectively, to try and support people in our communities or to deliver services. So I suppose there is a risk that we don't achieve that, but I think we've come a long way in terms of this authority in particular, in recognising that how to do that. So our partnership working is key. We've been doing it for years now. We don't improve attainment just by schools alone. We don't improve outcomes for children with who are care experienced from just the Children's Social Work Department. So I think it's not, I wouldn't paint it as a massive risk that we're going to fail. I think what I would try and urge us to think about is how do we continue on that journey and do it better. And I think we expand that all the time as to who those partners are, and some of the work that we've been doing as part of the Family Wellbeing Partnership is thinking about partners who the council traditionally would never have worked with before, and the Bardi Foundation is one of those, private industry is another, and some of the third sector organisations that tend to have been a bit more isolated and not been working in partnership.
So it's a direction of travel. I don't think there's a turning back, and I don't think it's the success in terms of is about sustainability and being able to achieve the best outcomes for click managers. So to me, it's less about risk and more about how do we continue to get the right approaches in place. I'm not sure that answers your question entirely, but I've tried.
No, it kind of does, because what you're saying is that, I think what you're saying is that success will breed success. If you're successful in what you do, then the participants will believe you to a greater extent in the plan, and they will encourage others. So I suppose that an important point then is to make sure that everyone understands when success is achieved, and that you keep picking up the troops, as it were. I know you're not in charge, but you're probably one of the main conductors in the band. Just make sure that everyone still believes that that's the right tune, and that will, if it's seen to be successful again, against traction, with other councils, and even becomes government policy, then that's all going to support things. So it's really keeping a light shining on what you're doing for the people who are maybe on the fringes and maybe don't see it as so important in their day and daily, in their particular little section of life. But keeping them on board is very, very important, is it not?
Absolutely. People have to recognise success for them individually, whether they're individually, their department, their family, their community, their authority, or whatever. And we have to try and work really hard to make sure that we are listening to what that success feels like and looks like for them, and then helping them see that. Because from one person to another, that can look quite different. So there's a range of ways of demonstrating that success. Some of it is through KPIs, and some of it is through actually telling stories. And we're trying to do that full range to try and gather in that evidence to say this is the way that this is showing that actually the outcomes are better with the same amount of and reproportioning the resources that we have into that way of working. It's years of work so far, even to get to the stage that we're at just now. But I think we're definitely leading the way, and we're going in the right direction. And from my perspective, and this is my personal perspective, the outcomes are better when you get that collaboration and when you've got this way of working. It's quite clear.
Any questions? No. If you want to move the paper presentation,
yeah, I'm happy to move the paper. I think it demonstrates just a small part of all the work that's kind of been going on across our services in relation to supporting our families and communities, and particularly our children and young people. So big thanks to the service. This is a new pioneering way of doing things, so I would imagine there are going to be bumps along the road as we kind of bed into things, but hopefully it does start to show the results that we're expecting it to. I do know there's significant interest across the country, as Lorraine has said, about this approach. I've certainly been sharing it with councillor colleagues in other areas, and I know the First Minister was very interested, and we did send it to him for his information, and feedback from that was quite positive. It has gone to the Alliance, so our partners are fully aware of the approach, and everybody at the Alliance agreed and signed up to supporting the approach. So I suppose only time will tell as to whether we can make more progress as an alliance, as a community planning partnership in delivering this approach. Significant pieces of work in there that have been highlighted. The attainment in our schools is particularly something I think we should all be proud of, and our colleagues in education should take a lot of credit for, because there was an inherent risk in taking a different approach. And sometimes as elected members you're like, oh, well-being, it can seem a bit fluffy and what's it going to deliver, but I think we can see that from 2016 that approach has delivered, so we need to keep on working towards making further improvements. In relation to the promise, I'm always conscious that there's more that we can be doing, and certainly as the Council's promise champion, I do question, and I do kind of reflect on things that we can be doing better. And I think the question about what all elected members can do, I think is really key, because it's not just down to one person. We all have a role in delivering that. that's just a snapshot, a few pieces of the work that's going on. I've not even mentioned the work on the Violence Against Women and Girls Partnership. We've done the significant work there. Our 16 days of gender activism against gender-based violence was particularly good this year. I think the service should be really pleased in the results there, but a lot of that was due to the Council's investment in a coordinator to make sure that we really progress that work. So we need to kind of keep on bringing back to the decisions we make will have impacts on the outcomes that we can expect to achieve from that. So good work. I'm glad to see the approach seems to be working so far, and we should keep an eye on it. Thanks.
And I'm happy to second the paper. I agree. I think this report format, I think it came to this committee first a way back, and it's really positive. I think we can see everything and how it connects. And just as Councillor Forson was saying about how everything connects, and Councillor Coyne, I think it's really important that we look at how everything works together. I mean, I thought a lot of these things I couldn't ask questions on because they just look like they're really positive, and like, you know, in terms of particularly in the kind of prevention work with young people to do with domestic abuse, I thought was really positive. Also, you know, the kind of way that we're trying to address things at an early stage rather than when we get to the stage that things are too desperate. For example, what we were saying there about when we're looking at care experience young people, we're not just, the promise isn't just looking at that, it's looking at how we prevent people coming into a care setting. I think it's absolutely vital. I mean, after spending 15 years working with adults who had been abused in care, I think it's extremely important, or not necessarily abused, but like in a care setting that really wasn't good for their well-being. I think it's absolutely essential that, and I think Clerk Manager is really ahead, as I've always said, in these approaches to make sure that the safety of people that don't become the adults whose mental health is so compromised that they can't really function. So I think it's absolutely essential what we're doing at an early stage, and also like as Leslie was touching on about the trauma-informed approaches, but I like the fact that you said trauma specialists, not just trauma-informed. And I think that's really important. We all have to find a way to be trauma specialists, but I think counsellors need to be as well, as you pointed out. I think it's absolutely essential that we all have that approach. So I think, again, I find it always hard to ask many questions because it's a really positive paper. I think the work's exemplary. I think it's creative. I think it's innovative, forward-thinking, and just really delighted to see it. So happy to second. And we're now open to debate if anybody wants to debate the paper. Councillor Coyne.
Not really so much to debate the content of it per se, and you're right about the questioning side. I mean, when I read through that, any questions I had were answered. So the details there was very good. It was an easy paper to read and contained a hell of a lot of information, well presented. So compliments to whoever put all that together. Did well. Good.
You happy to know the paper? You'll all be very pleased to know we're having a 10-minute break now.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll be okay. Welcome back, everybody, and we'll move on to the next paper. And I see you here already. So we're on to the police year-end business plan update. So over to Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. And the paper in front of you is the 23-24 year-end business plan update for Audit and Scrutiny to note, comment, challenge in terms of its contents. Members, in terms of the Police Directorate, it covers a number of key services delivered by the Council, and many of them are front-facing and service deliverable functions, as well as the key delivery of our housing service within Manager. The appendix within the document takes you through the range of KPIs and outcomes or actions that we had set ourselves for, and there are a number of key achievements highlighted through the report from our work against active travel, which I need to say we are very much leading a lot of the way in Scotland in that work, with significant work undertaken in terms of that agenda, as well as our performance around about our housing stock void reductions, which will always be a challenge and something that we would endeavour to make significant impact on. It would be important to highlight that there has been challenges in terms of the delivery of our business plan. A number of them being in terms of capacity and also a number of factors out with our control as a department. There has been challenges in terms of progressing some of our strategic work, and I've noted our work against the learning state strategy, but we have plans in place to progress that work. There's also been the development at West Hall, which we had real challenges progressing because of the Tier 1 contract going into administration, and that has proved extremely difficult, but we are working alongside Hubco East Central and Scottish Government, and officers are hoping that this project will be recommenced within this initial fiscal year. In terms of areas for development, I think it would be prudent to highlight that there are still areas for development, and we have picked some of that up in the current business plan year, and some of that has been round about our performance around elected member inquiries, complaint handling, FYEIR handling, which is featured into some of the other developments that's impacted the council in terms of our FY handling, etc. And certainly it's been a priority going forward. But I think it's important to say that the department remains committed to our objectives and our performance agenda, as well as that continuous improvement agenda. I would say that we have a department that has many dedicated staff for the delivery of public service here in Manager, and work tirelessly to deliver good public service. But we also recognise that there's always room for improvement, and we should always strive to improve for the people we serve. I've got some colleagues online and Murray with me, should there be any questions or queries or even challenge in terms of what we have within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that. I'm so conscious I asked you so many questions through the meeting already. So just on our first one, like in terms of one of the things that comes up time and again, obviously, is the voids. In a lot of cases, that's something we deal with a lot in inquiries, where people are waiting for somewhere and then they know they'll say, oh, there's all these empty properties, why am I not getting a house? So, I mean, I know previously in council we've looked at getting some resources in place to address that. I mean, has it made a difference? Do you think, like, you know, again, I mean, you mentioned the capacity word again. It's coming up time and again for us, but obviously that then has a knock-on effect with rent coming in. So, you know, is that going to be a sort of key priority moving forward to address that?
Thanks, Chair. And I'm going to bring Marianne to ask the bulk of your question there. I think it is important to highlight capacity is an issue, and I know, as Chris has mentioned earlier, there is a bit where we need to have a look at what do we stop doing. We know resources are extremely tight, and we need to look and review what we deliver that delivers the best value for our citizens, but also is within the realms of our capability in terms of capacity-wise. That's very tough decisions and a lot of internal works, and it also requires a lot of engagement with the people we serve, including yourselves as elected members, in terms of that direction of travel. So there is a need for us to look at that, and certainly going forward, I'd be really keen to explore what that could look like and feel like in that sense. I think also we're maybe victims of our own success, because I think we do try to deliver a great deal for our local communities, and sometimes that creates also some strain in the system, and we need to rethink where we can deliver, how we can deliver, and deliver within the means that we have available to us. But if I'll hand over to Murray in terms of the core of the question you asked.
Thanks, and clearly this came up last week at the budget session as well. So, yeah, and it's highlighted in the report there that clearly last year, obviously we had some challenges with the voids and council committed resources. And clearly, as referenced last week, the current voids, 56 days it's taken to process voids from end to end. Of course, that's a lagging indicator. So obviously the progress sometimes might not be met until some of that backlog's been necessarily cleared. But at the time of that report, there was 120 odd voids or whatever there was. And just now, this week, we're sitting with around 50 odd voids. Now, the briefing note which I've circulated to members indicates that there's probably a sweet spot in terms of our capacity around 40 to 45 voids, which would bring you in line with sort of like the targets in terms of that void rent loss around 1%, give or take. But what we have found, the refocus that Councillor Holden had asked last week, that we've probably put back on the voids, is what we've found is when voids start to creep up from about 50 to 55 voids, we do need to take mitigating actions. And that's where we've had to look elsewhere within the service at other capacity. So just in the last week, we've had approval for additional hours for extra resources coming in from janitorial staff, from education, coming in to help with the void clearances at the beginning and sort of void clearing at the end, which enables our trade staff just to solely focus on the repairs. It is something that we meet weekly in terms of the staff and trade unions, a weekly progress meetings to identify where there is issues, and then obviously we try and take mitigating actions to try and work on that as much as possible.
I've got just one more question and I'll move over to others. So there was a lot of mention about the change to the bin collections and the recycling side and how that's created some improvements, but I don't know if I read the figures wrong, but it looked like it was only, our recycling rates were only up by 1%, is that correct?
Chair, I'm going to bring in Ian MacDonald in terms of this particular question.
Yeah.
Hi there, can you hear me okay? Yeah, so apologies, having IT issues. Sorry, can you repeat the recycling rate that was in question?
So it looked like in the report that recycling rates after the changes to collections were only up by 1%, is that correct?
I think I would need to double check that. My understanding is that there's been an increase in the overall recycling, more than 1%, but that might be only looking at the introduction of the paper and card. So there's a new service that's came online now, so it needs to be seen with regard to the new service. So it might not be including the new paper and card service. It might only be referring to the what we could refer as a blue bin, the containers and plastic. So there might be an overlap there with the new service coming in that might not be pulling through the full picture. but I can definitely come back and clarify that for you.
Very much.
Chair, just in terms of because of the reporting timeframes, I actually think that's what it is in terms of the period it's covering from the introduction to the service. I think you'll see in this, because our recycling rates have definitely improved. In fact, actually, we are doing significantly well in comparison to other local authorities in our recycling agenda. So I think it's an important period because this is 23-24's period and we're almost finished 24-25.
Yeah, it'd be good to see a sort of more up-to-date picture, I think, especially because obviously anything that involves investment by council, it's good to see what kind of outputs we've got from that. So I think that'd be really good. Yeah, thank you. Is it Wilson?
Yeah, I have a number of questions. There's action in here, review the local economic partnership governance arrangements, and it said that was completed on the 31st of August 24. I'm just wondering when that will be coming to us for consideration, because I know this was an area that I'd kind of raised some concerns about, and as spokesperson, I've certainly not seen any kind of revised or kind of any report into that.
So I know that there has been work done in that area. I'll double check in terms of the specific, in terms of that aspect of it, in terms of the material that is being shared, in terms of it's maybe just the terminology that I put in the report. It doesn't marry up with in terms of some of the work that has been taken forward in terms of that economic works. I'll come back to you.
Can I sort of really say anything? Judith had wanted to come in on something and I hadn't seen her, so will you want to respond to something, Judith?
Yeah, it was just on the benchmarking question about the recycling rate. It was really just that, although this one is actually one where there's relatively little variance each year from authorities. So although our rate had increased by 1%, the actual Scottish average only went up by 0.2% in that year. So I think just to put it in a bit of a context, and it also improved our ranking, putting us back into the top quartile, which is where we had sort of traditionally sat, but then it had lapsed slightly in over a few years. But just that, although it looks like a relatively small improvement, actually in comparison to others, it's reasonably large.
Judith, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Wilson, back to you.
Okay. There is another action in here for our town centre master plan, and that's due to be completed by March 25, so 2 months away. I'm just wondering if there's any update on that thus far.
In terms of the master plan, there are staff now looking to take that forward. It's unlikely to be completed by March 2025, but will commence soon.
And can I just ask, will elected members have some input into the development of that plan, please?
Absolutely, it's my intention to have engagement sessions with members and with also focused stakeholders groups as well in terms of that piece of work.
Thank you. The other question is around about the benchmarking in relation to the cost of tourism and economic development per 100,000. That seems like an awful big figure there. It's coming in at, well, the value, cost of economic development and tourism per 100,000 population was 83,961. That seems particularly high considering we're delivering other services at a much lower rate. So I'm just wondering if that figure is correct, and if so, how we've reached that.
I'm hoping that Judith can maybe give us more information in terms of how that's calculated, because it is one that is that comes in from other partners in terms of how that is calculated. Judith?
Unfortunately, I can't give the exact detail. Lindsay, some might be better in terms of the actual financial return, the details of all the inclusions and the exclusions. But we do now have the financial data for 23-24, and we've actually had a 20% reduction on that figure to 66,904. So it's, and again, that's one where, although it looks like a very large figure, it is probably just because of the context that it's calculated in. So, I think the highest authority, let me see, is spending 321 million on it. 321,000. And so and again, that's another one that's moved back into the top quartile in terms of low cost. So in that instance, we look at low cost being the positive, but then that's up for debate as well, because in some of these, if you call them a cost of a service, it sounds like a negative, whereas if you call it investment in a service, it's a very different context. But yeah, so again, that there has been a substantial saving that in that 23-24 year.
And maybe add to the comments that you've given. What I've been made aware of in terms of the particular quantum is also the various different pots of money that are available in terms of tourism, and that's why there's a fluctuation depending on what funds become available. What I can do is I can get a list of what makes up that sum so that members are aware what other avenues feature into it, but it's not just about what money we as a council have, it's what other money comes in from the likes of Scottish Government or others that work within this theme that actually quantifies what that figure actually is.
No, it's just raising things, and I do know that the service had pulled together a report on all the economic development and employability services, so that might be something that would help explain that, so maybe we'll get to see that at some point. The other question I was going to ask was in relation to the benchmarking around the properties with superfast broadband. I'm not sure that that's something that the council really has any say over, really, but it's there, so I'm going to ask the question. We are quite high in relation to the properties, but we do have properties in more rural areas that don't have access to superfast broadband. And one of the satellite providers had actually withdrawn from the market more recently. So I've certainly been contacted by constituents who now have access to absolutely no broadband whatsoever, and that's more your kind of Forest Mill, etc. area. So I'm just wondering, do we have a more up-to-date assessment of that? And I mean, it's there, it's something that we're benchmarked on. Do we have a plan to, I suppose, improve the broadband levels for those who do not have it?
Councillor, that's an extremely good question. In terms of these developments, obviously we can work with developers as developments are taking place in terms of those priorities going forward. I think it's certainly something in terms of a local development plan as we take things forward that we can add in. We'll also add weight to those agendas for when we're granting planning permission for new developments, that's included in it, and how we then utilise some of the investment that comes back from those developments as well. If there are particular areas where we as a council believe that there is merit in supporting other developments within that. I think where we are potentially taking forward work, for example, within our Innovation Campus, where we look to have wider impact in terms of our connections with other providers and how they can invest in infrastructure locally. I think there's also a role for our regional economic plan as well in terms of how that adds weight to the wider development of these agendas. I wasn't aware of that particular company no longer providing in the area, but I'm happy to go back to offices to highlight this and also explore what other avenues we can add influence to, because we're not broadband providers, but we should be able to influence some of the private developments that are happening as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to the vexed question of West Hall maybe for a moment. I just wondered to what extent blame can be attributed and to whom for a failure of due diligence in the selection of this particular contractor. £5 million contract deserves a little bit of work done in the background in terms of selecting. Now, I know that I think nominally they were selected by Hubco, is that correct? Were we involved in the selection process to any extent? You know, do we carry any of the blame for bad due diligence on the contractor?
Thanks, Councillor. On this particular question, I'm going to ask the Councillor's solicitor to maybe contribute to the discussion.
Thanks very much. As you may or may not be aware, we actually are in discussions at the moment with Hubco in relation to the West Hall project. In terms of the due diligence that's carried out, that is something that is part of the partnership agreement that we enter into as a council. There's provisions within there in terms of how we go about, or how Hubco go about procuring that Tier 1 contractor. It's important to note that our contract is actually with Hubco. It's not with the Tier 1 contractor. So they also project manage it for us on our behalf. So the link there is in terms of, yes, we do have an input in terms of that Tier 1 contractor. As far as we were concerned, all the due diligence was done and we were happy at the time before Haddons actually went into administration. And it is important to note that they are in administration, they're not in liquidation, so the company still runs. But it's the Hubco decided to go down another route in terms of another contractor.
And that decision has ultimately either cost us money or has cost us value in terms of what's delivered at West Hall, because we either pay the additional costs or we don't, and we cut the plan. If we were to seek recovery first for that, I mean, have we a case to argue with Hubco about reparations?
I wouldn't want to discuss that in a public forum. I certainly am happy to appraise elected members in relation to the discussions that we've had with Hubco in relation to this particular project. We had Scottish Futures Trust and we also had the head of Hubco, along with myself, the Chief Executive, and Kevin last week to discuss the progress in relation to West Hall and where we are with it. There will be a paper, I believe, going to be brought to Council, hopefully in March, or if not earlier, in relation to the project in general.
Okay, just from my understanding, so it was Hubco that decided to terminate the contract with Haddons. Haddons didn't welch on the deal, basically. They went into administration, and which is a sign of weakness, of course, but it was Hubco that took that decision to finish the contract.
Yeah, Hubco did it, but you know, it was also through discussions with the council. We certainly had a conversation with Haddons when it was actually the Hubco board who refused to enter into the design and build contract.
Okay, that's probably all we can say about it for the moment, anyway. Yes. Okay, moving on to other matters. Yeah, this is in scrutinising things. We're looking at performance reports, and I find some of the targets kind of weird, but to say the least. If we start with page 235, operational buildings suitable for current use. Our target is only 85%, whereas in the two previous years, the achievement's been 91. Is that just silly? Somebody's forgotten to change that, or is there a crazy reason for why we should have a target lower than we've been achieving for 2 years? And that's a thread that runs through these things. And I've mentioned this before, and it irritates the hell out of me actually, because it's not giving us a proper steer on what you aimed to do and what you did or didn't do. I'll let you answer that.
Thank you, Councillor. And I share the point that you raised. The targets that were set predate my time here in that sense, and there's an element of some of that in this current year's plan as well. I think in senior managers within the department will have already been challenged by myself of why is the target set at the level it currently is. I think going forward you will see that certainly for 25-27 changed. There will be potentially some targets that are lower than our current performance rate as we deliberately work towards lowering that in terms of some of that conversation that we had about managing capacity, managing expectations, etc. So there will be some of that going forward in that sense, but I recognise the point you're making.
Thank you. Well, we'll leave targets out of it. On 2,